standpoint. We have a lot going on today. We appreciate Mayor Brand and his time, so we want to make sure that we've allocated enough time for a very important presentation. I know from a leadership standpoint, a lot of things are going on, whether it be COVID, protests, and everything else. From a military standpoint, I know those in leadership positions are at the height of the fog of war. For those that know that book and have read it. But as we get into this, again, just some reminders. Again, everyone's on mute, and I'll unmute as needed for presentations or otherwise. We'll go through and have some special presentations today as well. But also, you should have in your inbox through your email an email from Ryan as the upcoming president with a survey. And it's real important to do that survey. We've got a lot of great feedback so far. So if you haven't done that survey, if you can, rather than acknowledging that on Zoom, if you could just complete that so that we can get the most data possible, we'd certainly appreciate that. So again, it's in your inbox. If you don't have it, let Anna or Ryan know, or myself, and we'll get that to you. But if you can complete that survey, a tremendous amount of data there to get that taken care of. I have just a real quick, along with my boss, Gerald Lyles, I am a space geek. So a lot of fun stuff happened this last week relative to space. So I'm going to share a screen real quick, and I would just want to show something, and then I'll come back. Okay. Yeah, I know it was quick. It's basically the Falcon Heavy landing at a very precise dot out in the middle of the sea on a floating platform. So yeah, we sent people up into space, and they docked to International Space Station. But from a space geek like myself, having a rocket come back to Earth, and they've done it on land, I can get the GPS to that. But out in the point in the sea, for those that are in the Navy or otherwise, that's a whole other feat on this round planet. So I just wanted to share that relative to just kind of being a space geek and all the things that have to go with that. We have a lot of accomplishments, got some turmoil things going on, but I think as Rotarians and fellow business people, we can all appreciate just the innovation that continues to go on a day-to-day basis. Hey, speaking of innovation, we have a very special presentation today, and I'd like Blair, I'm going to unmute Blair because he's going to talk a little bit. Ron, who has got the best recliner in the house, is also with us today with his first Zoom. I'm going to try to unmute you as well, Ron. Blair, you want to go ahead and go, and we'll get this presentation going.
Thank you, President Todd. It's a real pleasure today, Rotarians, to be making history at our Rotary Club with our first ever virtual lifetime member. Virtual lifetime, first time in Rotary history, and we're making it today. This gentleman comes with a classification of real estate investments. He became a Rotarian on March 3rd, 1980. So 40 years ago, we were going to honor him in March, but here we are, 1st of June, because of rescheduling issues. He was working for Western Building Materials for 30 years into management when he became a Rotarian, and he was brought in by President Bob Jones. Now, how many of you remember Bob? You remember that Texas drawl that he used to come up to the microphone and give us the big hee-haw and howdy? That was a pretty great guy. Anyway, Bob was in the roofing industry, and our Rotarian sold him materials for many, many years, and proving that friendships can be made when you do business together. This gentleman invited Bob, or was invited by Bob, to become a Rotarian. In Rotary, he has worked on Rotary Playland and Storyland for 15 years. And then he got a phone call from Gilbert Nye, who invited him to come out and be involved in the amphitheater project at Woodward Park. He has 2 daughters, 6 grandchildren, and 2 great-grandchildren. And among his hobbies, and we recognized him last year for this, was that he loves hosting the Special Olympics bocce ball competition for Fresno County schools. And with that, if you haven't guessed it by now, our newest virtual lifetime member is Ron Sidoli. Ron, how are you today?
Yeah, better now that you took care of everything I was going to say.
Well, I know you have never been without words, so why don't you tell us a little bit about what Rotary has meant to you over the last 40 years?
Well, first of all, look at the friendship and the presentations of the people that have made history in Fresno. It's a lot of educational programs. When I first joined Rotary, I had gone to the other clubs to check them out, and I decided downtown was the only place to join because of the types of meetings we had. You know, I would not have gotten involved with Playland, Storyland if it hadn't been for Rotary, and it also wouldn't have gotten involved with the amphitheater. And it's gives me a lot of pleasure to do those things. I remember some of the things that transpired out at Playland, and I remember one time somebody making comments about going to do this, going to do that, and I stepped up the plate and got it done in 30 days, took it over. You know, you make a lot of nice friends. You have a lot of Monday's a great day. I look forward to all Mondays with lunch and socializing with the different Rotarians. I mean, how can I not enjoy Rotary?
Yes.
Well, for those of you who haven't had a chance to say hello to Ron at one of our meetings in person, you can find him in the southeast or the southwest corner of Cornerstone Church at a table right there. It's where he's always at. That's his position. And President Todd, if you would grab the gavel and swing around to the bell, Ron will tell you how many times he's proud to be a Rotarian.
Are you speaking to me now?
Yes, Ron. How many times did you want Todd to hit the bell?
I'll give you a courtesy one.
All right. Thank you, Ron, very much. And welcome to, oh, Anna, do you have the certificate?
Yeah, Anna just presented it to me.
Well, where is it? Let's see it. So everybody else can see what you aspire for.
Hey,
There
right.
you go.
Great job.
Give him a big hand, everybody. Thank you, Ron. Thank you, Todd.
You bet. Thanks, Ron. Thanks, Claire. Appreciate that. Fantastic. Always good to celebrate members, especially members that have been around a long time. That mentorship is what makes us an amazing club, as we have new members that come in, and I know there's guests that are joining us today. Welcome. As we have new members come in, we always have that business-to-business relationship because you always have mentors beyond that, really just to pick their brain and have a good lunch with them and just talk about business opportunities in our area. So that's fantastic. Thanks, Blair. Hey, Al Smith, you know, we have kind of a special guest today. I'm going to see if I can unmute you, or you can unmute yourself. Anna Pine, I cannot unmute people. Mayor Brand is unmuted. There we go. Al.
Is that better?
Yeah. Hey, would you like our very special guest today, sir?
Yeah, we're always happy to have this gentleman with us, and he's been with us, as he indicated earlier, many times before. It may be the last time that we're going to have him here as an official mayor of our city. He's been with us, as I said, many other times. He's here today to give us kind of an update of, gosh, a lot of things that are going on throughout our world. COVID-19, protests, budgets. In fact, I'm sure you'll address the budget thing. We're all having to return to an economy. Lee Brand has been the 25th mayor of our city. He was born and raised here, proud Rough Rider from Roosevelt High School. He achieved a pretty audacious educational goal. He had 3 degrees in 3 years: associate's degree at Fresno City, a bachelor's degree at Fresno State, and a master's degree in public administration at USC. He later went on to found Wesco Equities, a property management and construction firm, which he owned and operated for 30 years. He first got started in the public sector in the Planning Commission. He was on there for about 6 years, and then he moved to the City Council, served at District 6 for 2 terms, authoring and successfully passing over 20 legislative initiatives. He was elected mayor in 2016, and he is finishing his term in December of this year. with that, he's hoping to spend more time with his wife, his 4 children, and his 2 great-grandchildren, or great-grandchildren, rather. So with that, let me introduce to you the Honorable Mayor Lee Brand.
Thank you, Al. It's been a pleasure. This my last year. I thought it would be fairly routine. Of course, it's been the most extraordinary year in my life in terms of challenges either in the private sector or the public sector. So it's almost like if you go back about 8 weeks ago, I call it the tale of 2 cities. You could do this about any city in California, United States. So a couple of months ago, we had a A+ credit rating. We had a $34 million reserve. We had this ongoing fully funded pension system, the only one in the state of California, one of 5 in the entire United States. We reduced our general fund debt substantially. We're on a plan to continue that for my term and for my successor's term. Unemployment in Fresno last May reached 4.8%, the lowest by far in the history of the city of Fresno. In the first 3 years of my administration, we created about 18,000 new jobs. So that is a city that existed before March 15th. Now, the city that exists after March 15th has been changed dramatically. Now, we still have good credit rating, which will help us if we need to do borrowing on certain capital projects. We still have a fully funded pension system, and that seems to be going well. We restored core services from police and fire and hundreds of people over the last 4 or 5 years. And now, because of our budget shortfall, I'll get to that later, that's going to be challenged. And at a time when new businesses were coming on at a record pace, from small ones to large ones, et cetera, a lot of new people getting jobs. As we know now, because of the COVID, the decimating our economy, there's businesses closing, people unemployed, and so on. So that kind of is the tale of 2 cities, and it's the same tale for most cities. And the number one issue was COVID. It dominated everything for the last 2-3 months. But in the last 3 or 4 days, I mean, the national issue going on with protests, riots, and looting across the United States and many cities is front and center for everybody in local government. In fact, there's going to be there's an organization called the Big 13 Mayors. These are the biggest city mayors from Los Angeles down to probably Anaheim. Fresno's the 5th biggest city. We normally would meet once in Washington, D.C., maybe once or twice in Sacramento. We literally, these are like my buddies now. We meet twice a week by Zoom, share stories, wisdom, learn a lot about what they're doing in their cities and what they're going through. And again, we'll meet with the governor. All of us will meet with the governor this afternoon via Zoom. And so this issue has got to be resolved. This is the culmination of years and years and years of injustice. And I think all of us could make different debates on issues in the past. I don't think anybody was going to debate the current issues and what are going on. And by this overwhelming protest, and I'm talking about people legitimately protesting, not there to vandalize, to loot, to burn, we need to make some change, and we will start making some change. My goal is before I leave City Hall in a number of areas. Just to give you a few, I'm going to fulfill my promise to hire a new chief of police before the year's over, and that'll be a very interesting process. We have ideas on community-based policing. We're looking at opportunities for people, job training, education. But I want to leave with a positive mark. I want to, the Fresno was, as far as the big city, was probably the only big city in the entire country that had about a pretty big protest yesterday, about 3,000 people. And other than a few isolated incidents in other parts of the town, it was basically a peaceful demonstration. Hopefully we set the model for other cities to follow. And I'm really proud of the organizers who put this event together and their maturity as young people. One was a student at Fresno State from Black Lives Matter. Our chief of police, Andy Hall, and his staff are really executing well and de-escalating the process. Our city manager, and Mark Stander from our public affairs, he's my advisor most of the time. And other people on our staff that worked really hard to make sure this thing was pulled off. It wasn't by accident, it was by design. And a lot of people put a lot of hours in that. That being said, we're still moving ahead. We don't know what the future lies around this country. I'm hoping across the nation, other cities take the same pledge I'm going to do and look for real substantive reform and changes to engage the racial dialogue and bring peace and bring back prosperity to this city, to this nation. So that is on a front burner right now. One that's always been there for some time has been homelessness. Just to give you a brief update, that was our original budget priority prior to COVID. It's still a budget priority. From the money we received twice from the state of California, we were able to get about 640 beds, including 20 rooms at hotels for Marjorie Mason Center. And we have this CARES money, which is roughly about $92 million that we can use and have a lot of it to spend. We're still trying to find a way to get the federal government to let us use that for the impacts of COVID, which included dramatic drops in our sales tax, our room tax, gas tax, and so on. And I'll talk about that in more detail. But with these CARES money, we can also invest in motels. And unfortunately, a lot of motels around the valley and around the state, around the country, are 10% occupancy, so they're not making money. So there's an opportunity in certain cases to buy these and turn them over to 501Cs to basically, once this thing is over, to develop housing for homeless, which is an ongoing problem. And the thing that just totally grabbed everybody's attention, and for me, 7 days a week, 10 or 12 hours a day, I am totally focused on finding a solution, and we're dealing with the pandemic that we have before us. And I was on a talk show host a week or two ago, and somebody said, what's your plan on what are you gonna do? I said, you know something? This is the only pandemic I've ever had experience with. I wasn't around in 1917, 1918. And it's totally unique, just without precedent, its impact. So we started with a shelter-in-place order one day, I believe, before the governor did. And I knew that was coming anyway, but this basically put categories into essential and not essential. The original list of essential had about 4 to 8 categories. By the time I went through with the other council members, we added up to 80. So we got pretty aggressive on what we put up there. For example, sporting goods stores, which are supposed to be a phase 2, we're right in our phase 0. We opened them up. So we took a pretty aggressive stance. I wanted to be safe, at the same time, open up as many businesses as we possibly can. And I can think of no issue that's had so much misinformation out there, primarily spread by a few people, but then others. So the shelter-in-place order was a state mandate. I had dropped it the first day. It would still be there with the same classifications of essential, non-essential, closing down restaurants and businesses, had nothing to do with the city. So what we did finally in May, when I renewed the shelter-in-place order, is we basically got very innovative. We changed this essential and non-essential to what we called authorized businesses. To us, every business with an authorized businesses. So then we follow the state guidelines of stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, and our progress with restaurants. The city of Fresno never had any direct impact on restaurants. It was all up to the state of California and the county of Fresno. They regulate how restaurants run. And so till that happened, all we could do was have the takeout and delivery. So finally, the governor, and the relationship with the governor has been very good. It's helped out all the cities, including Fresno specifically, a few times. But he agreed that one size doesn't fit all, that he allowed counties to have variances based on their unique, like Fresno's a unique urban, rural type of geography and setting compared to Southern California, Northern California, very urbanized, high density. So we were allowed to take different choices. And I believe the county made their first submission to the state, I think on May 15th, and they took them a while to get there. We tried to help out too with the county. And once they got their approval from the state, the variance, which I believe was March 17th, we held a press conference about 2 hours before their press conference. And we basically opened up over 1,000 restaurants. We opened up over 1,000 retail, ranging from boutiques to Kohl's, to Fashion Fair, to River Park, to Macy's, all open in one foul swoop. And we were maybe then during this entire time, I believe the city of Clovis was primarily in a shelter-in-place order under the same restrictions we had. And I believe they pulled theirs about a week or so before ours on May 4th. But there was no regulation. And I believe you have to have a regulation because none of the restaurants would go forward unless they had this state sanction, which means they wouldn't be pulling their liquor license. So at ours on March 17th, every restaurant that went forward had their liquor license cut. Nobody, they were doing it the right way, following all the protocols developed by the state of California in conjunction with Fresno County. And we moved dramatically. My goal originally was to get all the restaurants open and all the retail by the end of May. So we actually were about a week and a half ahead of schedule. And then I didn't think this would happen until June. In conversations and dialogue with the governor's office, we were able to get the barbers and the nail salons. And because of that, I have a haircut now. It's not sticking out. I've tried to do my comb over, so it was getting pretty creative. I had a ducktail, maybe even a ponytail down the road, but I have my normal haircut. I think for all of us, that's just a small return to normalcy, which we're all looking for. So we've probably opened up at least 90 to 90% of the 5% of the business. And we did it in a safe and responsible way, because when I had to make a decision in real time on March 17th, March 18th on the shelter in place, I don't have a time machine. It's a real time machine. I don't know what it's going to be like in 2 months or 3 months. That context was New York City was drowning in COVID infections. They couldn't find enough hospital beds or ventilators. Italy and Spain were dying by the hundreds, by the thousands. And we were expecting that same pandemic, that tsunami, to come to California. The Governor Newsom, actually as early as February, probably earlier than any other governors in the United States, started planning across the state, identifying the number of hospital beds they need, even bringing the Mercy ship into Long Beach, taking things like convention centers, and being totally prepared. Every city did the same thing. And by doing the shelter in place, it dramatically diminished the impact it came on us. Now, you can argue that all day, but I can tell you it did make a difference. But I had to make a decision, literally a life or death decision. If I make a decision, oh, this isn't really serious, let's just go and open everything up, and I was wrong, and people die or get infected, I've got to live with that the rest of my life. So I made a decision on the air of life, okay? And we tried to always balance that safe and careful entry, as well as trying to take a really aggressive approach to get back to business. And I, as much as anybody, clearly understood the economic damage, the carnage out there in our economy, where thousands of people lost their jobs and businesses were failing, but we're on the track back. And some of the problems initially are like, some employers are telling me, Lee, I'd love to hire my people back, but they're making more money on unemployment insurance, which is a problem because this current deal that's being proposed is actually asking to extend that to December 31st. I don't think that's right, because we're opening jobs, our businesses, we have jobs. I don't want to disincentivize, particularly in the Central Valley, trying to get people out there. So we're working forward to this major pandemic. I believe next week, or this week, you'll probably see nail salons come on. Gymnasiums and health clubs, I think, are only a week or two away. By the end of this month, I think we'll be probably 95 to 98%. The only things that'll be the number fours are going to be the large events like having a State of the City at the Convention Center, having concerts at Soroyan, having Bulldog football games. I don't think those will come on, or they'll come on maybe to some modified extent, hopefully, until there's a vaccine, which could take a while. So I think this is something we're going to have to live with for a while, but we're adjusting. And when the restaurants now are on a formula that is, we call it approximately 50%, because it's based on the floor plan, and they cannot operate at that level for only so long. So we've got to find a path to get them to start there. You know, everything is data driven too. The whole thing with the state was based on, it's not so much on the aggregate number of cases, it's based on how many of those cases require hospitalization. So we do 1,000 tests in one day and 500 are positive and only 20 require hospitalization, we're in pretty good shape. But if the number of infections, the state standard metric is anything over 8% on a 7-day average is considered in the wrong direction. And we're kind of not quite leveling the curve off yet, but our number of tests are going up. And if we, for example, have 150 ICU beds and so many other beds, and we have the point where they're to be up to capacity, that's another trigger to slow down. So this is the old difference switch. I've got the light turned on now, and we're going forward. We're opening businesses, but if some dramatic evidence comes in of people going to hospitals, people dying, we may have to turn it down and slow it down for a while. I'm hoping we'll continue in the right direction. Unfortunately, all these big demonstrations across the country, most people didn't have masks. They were next to each other. I pray to God that it doesn't turn out to be a disaster in a lot of cities, because there's nothing I can do to control that. And so those are the backdrop. And I formed a Fresno Recovery Committee that I wanted people from from different sectors. I originally had 12 people. Then I got I want a person from this group and from that group. I could have a couple hundred people on it, but I eventually got about 25 people. And there's a lot of specialists, like people from St. Agnes Hospital, from UCSF, medical experts from Community Hospital. We have people from the Chamber, EDC. There's a pretty good broad representation. So they've been kept abreast of all the moves we've made. There's not really an approval, it's an advisory committee. And we'll be meeting again, and there's subcommittees on business, on education, job training, and I forgot the third one. But that's going on too. So now, with all that backdrop, KLO2 cities, the COVID pandemic dramatically affecting us, we have a budget time. And I've been doing budgets for 12 years at City Hall. I've never seen one like this, because we went from a booming economy, and our budget people are so precise, they get within 2%. So if the general fund is $350 million, they're within $7 million. If anybody here has a budget, and you get within 2% of your budget, you're doing pretty damn good. And these people are telling me, because the state's delaying its submission of data on the second and third quarter of the sales tax, they're in the blind right now. We need to find a way to have more information, to gather that, to make a rational decision. So what I did is almost unprecedented. It's called a continuing resolution. We take our budget that's continuing and it's balanced from May 15th, and we basically use that as a bridge into 2 or 3 months into FY 2021. And by doing that, by let's say September, we're going to be able to see the third and fourth quarter sales tax data, to see what happened, particularly in that fourth quarter. We can also start to observe in July and August what's going on. Are people starting to get back up? Restaurants getting people in, retailers. Then we can make an informative, rational decision and go forward. That's one reason. And the council itself will fill their charter role. The council initially will get an overview of this budget. They have to vote on it. And I've got to work hard and educate council members on why I believe this is the only way to go. Because if they don't follow the continued resolution, currently based on the best thing we have right now, we believe we're about $39 million short. $39 million is a big chunk of money for the general fund. And 70% of that's going to be personnel related. So if we had to balance that right today, that's an accurate number. There's no way you can avoid potentially furloughs, potentially layoffs. And we're not planning anything except holding back on refilling the vacant positions and so on. So those are the kind of restraints I've got. And I hope I can be successful and talk at least forward to do this, because I think it's necessary. The other reason I'm doing this is I believe there's a very strong chance we're going to get additional funding from the federal government, either from the CARES money, which it was $92 million. We could set aside $40 million on that, and we could, take care of our problem, because all of these revenue losses, sales tax, room tax, franchise tax, gas tax, are all directly related to COVID. And the other thing that people don't think about, tax-driven incentives like Measure C are based on sales tax collection. So all these plans mapped out, these capital projects in the next 5 years, they could be under total change. That's all the uncertainties out there. And I do not believe the federal government will let so many cities and counties and states file bankruptcy, because in California, our deal is roughly 14% of our budget. We could find a way to get past it. We also have a $34 million reserve, one of the biggest in the state of California based on our size. If we had to, and that's got to be held off, because one thing that could be done with the council could go forward, force a vote on this budget and apply the entire reserve and take most of the hurt out of it and the sting out of the cuts. The problem would be, let's say a month or 2 months later, we get $40 million. I can tell you right now, the odds aren't very great they're going to put that back in the reserve. It'll probably be spent. But it's the premature using of that reserve. Over the last 2 years, there were threats of up to $15 million that I held fast. I had the votes, and I protected that reserve when it's a true time of need. I believe there's a reasonable chance that we can get federal funding the next 2 to 3 months that would alleviate having to use the reserve. So that's a highly unusual situation. My expertise has always been in finance and budgets. I'll go by my track record. To get us in the situation we had now took a lot of work going back to my days in the council and took a lot of work in my 3.5 years so far as the mayor. Now, let's finish up by saying there's a lot of issues that were out there that are probably not going to be really addressed this year because of what's going on. One obvious one is the ballot issue that we talked about: parks, public safety. Given this economic climate, I would say that's next to impossible. I know some schools had some bonds. They may have to second consider that. I know Measure C is looking at maybe 2022. That's going to be an all new date for right now. And affordable housing, general plan update, these things are probably going to be in the back burner as we focus on, again, race relations. We have to address it in a substantive, tangible way to make a difference in people's lives. And we have to continue to address in a safe and responsible way the COVID crisis. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Thanks, Mayor Brand. Appreciate that. And I do have a couple questions I need to get to. Just, on behalf of Rotary, we're all business leaders, and we just appreciate the decision that you made. I think that was the most struggling part, whether that be in March or this last week or otherwise. So, no matter where you are on the side of the aisle or where people's philosophies are, you can't make everybody happy, but the decision to do something, very much appreciate that. And I'm wanting to share that with you from several Rotarians that have indicated that to me. Just relative, we've had a few Rotarians that kind of participated in the protest yesterday in the downtown area. And I know you have a new police chief kind of on deck, but the current police chief is doing his best to communicate. But do you have ongoing plans to help bridge some of the gaps on that community leadership with those several factions and kind of sit everybody down relative to the police side? Do you have anything on deck for that?
One of the big ones will be replacing the chief. And again, the easy way to do it, let Andy Hall, who's doing a great job, just let him finish up and let Jerry Dyer, the incoming mayor, deal with it. But I made a promise before I leave this office, we're gonna make a switch. Andy was only a temporary measure. So that will be, you'll see a lot of engagement with the community on this one. Maybe some more community meetings, panels that will have community members on it and so on. So I intend to open it up quite a bit to community members, and maybe we get down to the top 3 and have another community forum. These are all just ideas, but I will meet with the organizers of the event, and I've met in my advisory board. I have like Pastor Binion, Pastors Kreiner, and Pastor Lewis, and others that are on my board that I talk to on a regular basis. I have a faith-based council. I have a lot of different things I draw upon, a lot of people with varying backgrounds to give me advice on what's the best way to go forward. But I think the 2 things that can fundamentally change a person's life are education and jobs, or job training. So those are things I need to focus on to get the funding, to get the emphasis, to get the inertia on trying to change lives that have been denied. And nobody can argue about the tale of 2 cities, but it's just reached not only this city, across our country. This issue can no longer be laid aside. We've got to open it up. We've got to listen, both sides, and we've got to make some positive changes.
Yeah, thank you for that. And you mentioned a few areas that you opened up sooner than either what the governor's office said or not. And that's probably, just from a business perspective, a lot of confusion, right? We got the federal rules, the state rule, the county, which sometimes the city defers to, and sometimes a city rule. But do you have any aspects on like weddings or outdoor events outside of kind of the golf, more one-on-one, and how that is in the stages of opening?
Well, you saw the whole thing on churches. They got churches up to 100. I think in another 3 weeks, they're going to reevaluate churches, and churches may be a barometer because you got a lot of people, if they can safely have these meetings with all the protocols, from having masks and having social distancing and so on, it can work. I know there's a lot of people out there that are, that are like event planners. They have things at the convention center. In fact, the convention center, all those events, all that revenue, that's all gone for us right now. So we need to find ways to get those people back to work. I can say the governor's office has been very fluid. And again, everybody's under tremendous pressure. Even before all the protests and all the riots, every mayor and the governor has been under tremendous pressure to get things open. But we're dealing with something that we've never dealt with before. This virus is elusive, it's dangerous, it's unpredictable. So we do the best as we go forward. Again, we just rushed pall mall ahead without any safety concerns. The worst thing I can imagine would be sometime in the fall or the winter, it comes back with a vengeance. So one thing I forgot to mention, the city's doing with the CARES money, we've talked to the county as an ongoing dialogue. I think our relations are much better with the county. We need to work together. So the city's going to invest $10 million in helping the county do testing sites, laboratory work, and getting contract tracers, where we're going to have an army of contract tracers. We're also going to work about buying the PPEs and having a warehouse full of those, having the safety protocols in hot issues like nursing homes, having all that stuff, testing, tracers. So if it does come again, let's say in October, November, we know from our science by then it's advanced quite a bit. We know by our inventory, we can, and are working with our partners at Fresno County Health Department and the local hospitals, we can identify, treat it right away, and then just pretty much kill the problem and not let it go like this time for a variety of reasons. It went way beyond what it should have went. But I think we've learned a lot as a society and as a city. I want to make sure we have that prepared in coordination with the county, that we're prepared if it comes back again. Because believe me, the last thing I want to do in my time as mayor is put another shelter in place. Believe me, I want to get past that.
Yeah. No, I can certainly understand that, no doubt about that, and appreciate you looking at all the data. That's some of the things that we don't know or we don't necessarily see through the media. The data that you have on your end, and I know crunching those numbers is a little difficult compared to what everyone else is telling you in your ear. No doubt about that. Relative, and again, we kind of scheduled you for a COVID update and how the city's doing, and obviously we have the ongoing situation with the protests and riots, and thankfully not in the Fresno area, although social media wise, there are a lot of even local through Facebook or Instagram that are kind of instigating, hey, show up here. I think I saw one yesterday, Chancey Park parking lot, bring a brick, da 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 da. How do you monitor some of that stuff? Because I mean, if the general public can see that, are we prepared to deal with some of those things and maybe squelch that before it really gets going? Or how do you see that in the
over the weekend? I met with a lot of people. There's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes. All of our staff, from our public affairs people, our city manager, our PD, everybody's getting things set up. All that success was based on a lot of preparation. And Fresno PD, for example, doesn't park its cars in front of obvious places that are targets. They park them blocks away. They don't have a lot. If they have 200 people available, they only maybe show 50 because they want to de-escalate. I think Andy Hall and his people did a tremendous job in doing that. And we get these things all the time. I know Pastor Kreiner gave me the warning on the meeting at Chancey Park that did include about 50 to 100 people. He walked with those people all the way to the Tower District.
That's
and only, I think it was just 2 or 3 of them that broke a window or something. Other than that, everybody was peaceful. The ones yesterday were peaceful, but we're still getting these, because the police, they monitor social media. So they're on top of things. There was rumors yesterday evening about Target stores. There's rumors about River Park. So we're on top of things. And these are outside groups that are absolute anarchists, or they're not normal people living in Fresno. They don't want to see things improve. They want to see things destroyed. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a national debate, that's a state debate on how to effectively deal with those. Because I think if you do that, you cut the snake's head off, then you take care of a lot of the problem. And I know in other cities, they've identified and arrested people that are clearly outside, that are not locals, that have credentials that they're involved in these kind of activities. We have to take back our country. We cannot permit looting and burning. This is our city. We have to protect it.
Yes, agreed. Okay, thank you for that, Mayor Brand. We very much appreciate your time. It's been about a year. Love to have you come back after you move on from the mayor's duties and just see how things are going with your life and everything else. Ladies and gentlemen, Mayor Brand, thank you so much for everything that you're doing for our city, the hard work you're doing. Really appreciate that.
All right, thanks for having me.
Yep, thank you. Al Smith, you've got a little preview of who we have next week.
Yeah, Mayor, thank you again for being here today. And we'll have that membership application in the mail. So January, you can join us as a member. And, and that would be nice.
The order so we can meet. That'd be even better.
That's true.
A little bit there would go great.
So next week,
God, see everybody.
Bye. Thank you. Thank you.
Bye,
next week, we're going to move to a new topic. As most of us know, 50% of the population of Fresno County is now Hispanic. In that right, a lot of entrepreneurship is being taken active. And so we will have Dora Westerland, who is the president and CEO of the Fresno Area Hispanic Foundation, to join us and give us a kind of an update of what's going on in that community, how we can help and assist and make this reflective of the community in which we all live. So Dora Westerland will be here. I think it'll be a great program. So put it down in your calendar, and we'll see you, I guess, on Zoom next week.
Thank you, Al. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Hey, we have had a lot of guests today. Pete, obviously Gary Castro from my favorite Sue. Everyone knows Gary. And Justin, Janine, obviously Mark was there from the mayor's office, and Jen with Ashley Webster. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a great information session and a Zoom meeting. Rotary, we're a business-to-business connection. Always like our members to get value out of the membership, and this is just one way we do that. Make sure you see our midweek updates or a Friday update from Anna and or any of the executive team. And we just wish everybody a great week. I will end it with the bell ring right behind me. You guys have a great week. We'll see you. Thanks so much for everything.